Welcome back to another edition of our Health, Hope, and Happiness broadcast brought to you by Stifel. On today's segment of Ask Dr. Steve, CNA, of course, welcomes back Dr. Steve Graef, owner of Mindurance, an organization for one-on-one online mental health coaching to help coaches and athletes manage stress and enhance their performance. Last time, Dr. Steve, he said we might have an announcement about some exciting changes coming to Mindurance. So after enjoying your time in Europe a little bit, do you have an update for our listeners?
No, and in fact, I'm not even sure what I would have been referring to at that time. But nonetheless, now I know how to sail. So that's an update for me personally. I don't know how much value it holds for the Mindurance brand or for the clients that I work with, other than having tremendous sailing metaphors now. So watch out for those sailing metaphors. We'll see if I drop any here this this podcast. But it's good to be back.
All right. Well, so today's topic, we're going to look at body imaging. And by this, we are looking at athletes who may see huge swings in weight and muscle tone due to their sports during the season to possibly give themselves an advantage in competition. And so for a lot of people, when that comes to mind, we could be talking about our swimmers and wrestlers here in the winter season, but I'm sure for cross country and track runners and some other sports, football players, they'll also be able to relate to this. So as usual, we break this topic into tips for our coaches, our athletes, and parents. So we're going to mix it up a little bit here and start with our athletes instead of our coaches first. So Steve, today, athletes see trainers for many different things, conditioning coaches, agility and performance trainers. So depending on the sport, athletes' muscle tone and weight gain or loss can take some extreme tolls on the body. So psychologically, does this truly give athletes an advantage? And what do they need to be aware of when they're working out?
Yeah, well, these are fantastic questions. I first want to lead with the caveat that though I am a counseling psychologist and a sports psychologist, when it comes to body image and eating and those types of things, there is even a specialty within the specialty. So I'm certainly going to do my best to answer some of these questions, but keep in mind that if you're somebody out there that's really struggling with body image or eating concerns, or if you're a coach or an athletic director, or a parent or an athlete that wants more specific information regarding body image, that's it's out there. So I'm a general expert, but this is a topic that does require some specialty expertise. But nonetheless, I think being informed about the sport that you're entering into and the nature that weight can or cannot play into that sport, I think is really important because there are models of successful athletes of varying weights and of varying body types and images, even within a sport. So we have some stereotypes that may pop out. So I think just informing yourself is what might be required getting into this sport. Is that truly required? And consulting with experts and other people who have participated in the sport, I think can give people a nice understanding going into it. And if you have a nice understanding going into it, then it becomes a little easier to gauge how am I approaching this? How am I handling these workouts? Am Do I think I'm being healthy based on what I've read, based on what experts and other coaches have kind of said, or am I kind of taking this in a different direction? So from that understanding, it allows you to assess more appropriately in the moment.
Great. So if we start to take, we'll just start with football and basketball. Obviously, you're much more aware of the football aspect because you played the sport. Lifting weights is way more relevant today than maybe it was in the 80s, early 90s. I know my son is a basketball player. He takes creatine. He does the whole protein shakes and stuff to try to get him stronger while he's lifting. Today, female athletes are also using some of these supplements. So is this practice good for athletes or not? And how does this affect their mental health?
Yes. So the practice can be, if it's done with intention, and appropriate application. I've encountered many athletes that are just taking creatine and they just take it and they don't really understand what it is that they're taking, why they're taking it, the dosage that they need to be taking, the frequency that they need to be taking it, if they need to be taking it every day for the entire year. So I think some greater clarity and understanding about what it is that they're taking and why it is super beneficial. From a psychological standpoint, I think sports medicine has come a long way, and a lot of these nutritions and supplements and such are positive if used in a healthy, appropriate type of manner. But again, I think it requires a nice inward check of asking yourself, why am I taking these things? Am I taking these things because I think that they're going to round out my overall performance and I've read up on them and they're healthy and I'm going to dosage in the way that I've talked to experts and it's going to round out my performance? Or am I taking these things because of some other reason? I feel lesser than, or it helps me feel like I'm on the same par as other people, or other people are taking it, so I'm going to take it, even though I don't know how it's necessarily going to respond to my body. I think that deeper understanding of why I'm taking this is another important psychological element when it comes to the supplement and the nutritional piece.
Yeah, so I think we talked about it. I mentioned it earlier. We're going to take a look at wrestling. Perhaps there's no other sport where dramatic weight shifts can take place trying to get into one class or the next class. Athletes may sweat a lot to try to lose weight, or probably eat everything in sight to gain that extra pound or two. So when discussing mental well-being, eating properly, rest, how do athletes kind of control some of these extremes and still maintain, good positive mental health?
Yeah, it's a toughie, because on the one hand, this type of culture and behavior has been going on for years, since the advent of the sport. And there's people that handle it really successfully, and there's people who maybe don't do so well with those types of constraints and variables involved. But then you could also say, well, maybe we should just change the culture of wrestling to where these extreme shifts are no longer needed in order to perform in the sport. So there's this interesting kind of dilemma that we find ourselves in. I think the culture has kind of shifted a little bit, but maybe still not where you can just wrestle at whatever weight you happen to be at. So again, it comes to education, healthy practice. If you're going to drop weight, how do you drop weight in a healthy type of way? Having support so that you yourself, as an individual wrestler or swimmer or whatever case you may be, that you don't handle the burden of your weight all on your own. That you're consulting with athletic trainers, sports medicine professionals, your parents, your coaches, so that the expectations are reasonable. The expectations are such that you can do what you need to do in a healthy type of way. And again, just continually checking in on you. Why am I doing this? Am I feeling like this? I'm able to do this in an appropriate, healthy type of way? Or by doing these cuts, am I starting to jeopardize my mental health? And only you can really identify that to some extent, but also leaning on that support system with those check-ins and say, how am I doing? I feel like I'm all right. Do you guys perceive me as being all right? So it really takes a team and a deliberate self-awareness to say, yes, I'm able to do this healthfully, or no, I'm not.
Yeah, and so we were going to move into talking about swimming a little bit towards tournament with tapering, but I think you kind of covered that with the wrestling a little bit with, again, just doing those mental check-ins. Am I doing this properly, et cetera? Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, or you think you covered it?
I think I covered it, but I think a take-home message is, so often as athletes, we just kind of jump into a sport. We jump into a sport, and then we're in the water, pun not intended, of that sport in the case of swimming. So then we're in the water of that sport. So then we just take what we're being told as just the absolute truth, that this is what's required to be successful in that sport. And some of that may be based on fact, some of that may be based in history, and some of that may be based in urban legend or anecdote or other things that maybe don't have as much objective value to it. So I think if you're an athlete, really in any sport, like know really what you're getting into and what it means to be successful in that sport, and then look to the models that do that in a healthy way, align with experts in your social support system to then enact the things that are ultimately appropriate and healthy, and not just do what they're doing because that's what you're being told to do. So I think that's something additional I would add in.
So, do you think this could have some long-term effects for an athlete who goes through some of these swings, who maybe, as you just pointed out, does not understand why they have to do it or why they should be doing it?
Yeah, I think it can. I mean, in its simplest fashion, as a younger football player, I used to just be able to eat, 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 and you would go and you would burn that off, and everything would be fine. Well, just because you age doesn't take away how used or accustomed you were to just eating a whole bunch. So when I would, even as a grown adult, when I sit down to meals, I'll just consume a whole lot of food because that's what I had been doing for 10 years worth of training. And so, um, now, but you get older and you're not burning that off anymore, right? So there's some
Right.
challenge even, and that's in very kind of simple, not overly clinical psychology type of thing. That's just like you got used to this routine, and it's hard to break that particular routine. So I think it can be challenging for folks. Some people are able to navigate this, right? It becomes no big deal. They change up their eating habits, they find their set weight, and they continue it into adulthood. But for other individuals, it may not go that seamlessly, and it may really be a struggle. And that's why we have specialists that are out there to be able to work with those individuals and be able to chat with them and know the situation that they're actually under. And so I really encourage people that if you have not been able to segue out of that sport, and you still find yourself thinking about weight related things beyond a normal level, or thinking about kind of the impact of what you're putting in your body and how your body looks and such beyond maybe a typical level of, like, what I mean typical level, like, ah, damn, I
Right.
got this wedding to go to, I want to fit in a suit, I better figure that out. Something that's, and that may even warrant a conversation too. So just don't be afraid to reach out and chat with somebody, even if it's a half an hour session, just to get another set of ears and eyes on the situation, and then you can adapt from there.
And finally, on the athletic side, we're going to cross in with a little coach's question as well. If the coach suspects something with their athlete that is not appropriate, or maybe they're more tired or whatever because they're going through these swings, what can the coach do with the athlete um, to kind
Yeah.
of get through this?
Well, again, I think a lot of this, as I've talked about before in other podcasts, a lot of this starts at the very beginning, when we're first meeting our athletes, when we're first meeting with the team and talking about the nature of our sport, how sometimes lean can get the job done a little bit better. So there can be an emphasis on weight sometimes. Certainly there's weight classes in wrestling. So kind of having a normalized discussion about how weight enters into the performance question, not only as a coach, but also bringing in resources of your athletic trainer, your sports medicine physician, etc. So that sets a baseline of understanding with the team that this could be, doesn't have to be, but it could be a thing. It's a thing. So then when the time comes later in the season and there's a potential issue that you've observed, as a coach, certainly you want to consult with the athletic trainer, right? Maybe run it by them, him or her, maybe the physician, and say, these are some things that I'm noticing. How do we want to address this? And so then that's open communication, and then either the trainer can go to that individual, the person who has the best relationship can go to that individual, and just kind of see what's up. And then at that point, it's education, it's resources, and collaborating with other professionals. But I think it starts with that early meeting, and then aligning with the resources that you have available to you when the time comes.
So before we transition to the coach's side, is there anything else you want to add on the athletic side?
Yeah, well, I think it's important for the athletes to feel empowered. You hear stories sometimes of where an athlete may be pushed or highly encouraged to maybe go into this weight class or to drop weight for their swim team, and maybe they personally don't want to do it. So I encourage athletes to feel empowered in your decision making, to say yes or no and do what you want to do with your particular body. I think continuing to educate oneself. If you're using supplements, educate yourself on it. If you're thinking about dropping weight, educate yourself on it. What's the pros and cons associated with doing that? And then the other piece is just on it, like celebrating diversity. You know, there's a lot of stories out there where people who might not have looked the part ended up being just incredible athletes, even though they might not have matched the stereotype of what would have been expected as that incredible athlete in that particular sport. So just recognizing in the diversity that's out there in body type, body image, and weight, and that people can still perform.